I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of the Resurrected A Winner Is You podcast. As ever, my name is David and I'm sitting 300 miles across from Mr. Alex Aldridge. How are you today, Alex?
Ahoy hoy, how are you, sir?
I'm fine. I'm going to start and just being completely rude and not asking you how you're doing when we first load up this Skype call, because then if you're doing amazing or you're doing terrible, it'll be a genuine shock.
Good point. Maybe I can slip it in later.
Yeah.
Or I can tell you at the end how it's changed from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How things have progressed.
Yeah, I was fine, but now...
I might want a Winner Is You 20-point scale rating then.
Okay.
So you can tell me on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being perfect.
Oh, I was going to say, don't reveal what the numbers mean, and I can just say a number, and everyone will have to figure it out.
Okay, yeah.
So from my cadence for the rest of the episode, they'll be like, "Oh, he started off at a 7, but then he went down to a 3, or did he go up to a 10?" I don't know which way the scale works.
But on the Winner Is You scale, a 4 might be better than a 5, but also worse than a 7. So
yeah,
you never know.
Exactly. That's how we like to keep things.
The mysteries of A Winner Is You.
The most enigmatic games podcast on the internet.
Yes. Do you want to tell us what this episode is? Because this is sort of the first episode in earnest of our new and improved format, right?
It is indeed. Although it is a format we have treaded water with before, water being the operative word. But now we're doing it full on as our podcast mantra is we are starting off our Game Club podcast in earnest, as David said. So today we are talking through BioShock, which was our first game, which we picked basically because David had already played almost all of it before we started podcasting again, so it was easy for us to get going.
Yeah. To be fair, it's not a bad one to start with. It's like one of the seminal Xbox 360 games, isn't it? It's
absolutely.
Like the one that people hold up as being like I was going to say a modern classic. I guess it's not anymore. It's just a classic.
I suppose you're right, yeah. And I guess you can point to a lot of facets of this game that have been copied by lots of other games since then, that they will obviously claim that they pioneered, if not invented.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the time to go in, but I think I said to you before or just after we chose BioShock and we'd been saying that I'd been playing it, and I think that I don't know if we want to dive right into it, but I think this game is now starting to show its age, but you can see the tendrils of how it moved the genre in the medium on a bit. And where modern day storytelling is sort of taken what BioShock did well and improved upon it as power and just storytelling prowess in the industry has improved.
Yeah, I mean, when I've watched the commentary stuff from the remastered versions, it seems as clear that Ken Levine and his team really wanted this to be thought of more as a shooter than an RPG. But in adding those RPG elements that they did to the game, it definitely pushed shooters into a different place than they'd been on before. Yeah. Certainly with an emphasis on choice of how you play it, speccing a character, and the way that they tell the story, and the emphasis on the story rather than just shooting stuff is probably why this game is still held up where it is and why it was so influential.
I think that's, for me, what I've had is the biggest takeaway of this game. And I was trying to think about this the other day, and Ken Levine's the first game designer, if that's his proper job title, that I can think of in the industry that really put storytelling at the front and centre of what he was doing. Now that's fairly commonplace. I mean, that's basically what Naughty Dog do now.
But it probably wasn't what they were doing at this point.
No, it wasn't. Definitely wasn't. But he's the first sort of big name guy. Like, there's lots of famous people in the industry over the years, but none of them saw the video game industry as a place where you come and tell stories. Whereas I think now it's a viable place where you can come and tell the story you want to. Whereas before, I guess it's funny because Ken Levine's in a way gone and done it the other way around. But if you wanted to tell stories, you gone off and wrote scripts for movies and TV.
Yeah.
You didn't make games.
True.
Where he's the first guy I can think of. Maybe Hideo Kojima.
I was going to say,
yeah,
maybe the first
Western
developer for sure. Because around this time, if you're talking about big name American or Western developers, the only other guy that springs to mind from, when was this out? 2008?
Something like that. This is like the Cliff Bleszinski.
Exactly who I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
And there's nothing story based about that dude.
No, absolutely not. And the other one, Peter Molyneux, is the other big name around that era that I can think of as well.
That's true, yeah.
Who did try stories, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, he was big on lies. He told a lot of stories.
Big on lies, yeah. I think he was...
But he wasn't making shooters.
No, he was making RPGs, which I suppose is a lot of what RPGs have always been.
Yeah.
Do you think I think RPG storytelling is better now? Do you think it's better because, in part, by this game?
Again, modern RPGs, yes. But I suppose if you're looking at RPGs in general, a lot of people will probably point to the ones that were on the previous generation of consoles in terms of the Final Fantasies and things like that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the JRPGs, I suppose, are always really heavy on story because the combat was always turn-based and it was always a means to get to the next part of it.
Is it BioShock's fault? I'm trying to think, maybe you've got a better memory than me, but is it BioShock's fault that then we kickstarted about 5 to 10 years of every game that wasn't an RPG told their story through audio logs? Is it this game's fault?
I think it must be, yeah. And I think that on paper and in principle, that idea works because you don't want to be totally stopping the action all the time, especially in this type of game. Certain genres of game, obviously, that's fine. You can stop the action to watch a cutscene in an RPG, a JRPG or whatever, all you want. But in a shooter that they want to keep as being fast-paced and action-oriented, then you don't want to be interrupting the player all the time. But unfortunately, that will lead to you missing out on parts of the story, but just purely because you can't really pay attention to two things at once. Certainly when one person's telling a nice, quiet story on an audio log while a big daddy's charging and trying to spear you into a wall. I do notice that they try to ramp the volume of the audio log up while you're getting attacked, but it still never really was enough. I'd normally, if I found an audio log, I would stand basically still. Yeah,
because if anything else happens, you forgot to listen to the audio log. It's like sticking an episode of Porridge on in a doctor's office as you're dishing out cancer diagnoses and then quizzing people on what had happened on the Porridge episode.
Yeah, especially when they're giving you codes to a door. The code is 1795. What? Sorry, mate. This splicer's just trying to rape me with a hook hand. I ain't got time for your numbers. So I'd bring up the map screen because that you can listen to it, but it pauses the game. So if you hit the map screen, you can listen to the audio log in comfort while the big daddy stands and waits patiently for you to stop looking at a map.
Which I guess is a shame because that essentially negates what they were trying to do. They were trying to let you to carry on playing the game and absorb the story, but really, if you wanted to properly absorb the story, you couldn't do that. Like, I found that the first time I played this game back in, 2008, did you say?
Yeah, I'll have to check that.
I really took the story in. And this time round, I played while I listened to the audio logs, and I had to go back and watch videos to remind me what the story was, because I just hadn't absorbed it at all.
Do you think that the part of that is 2007? Do you think that part of that is because you already know the story? Do you feel like it was diminished because you knew what was
I guess
happen?
There's probably an extent to that. That's probably why I didn't give it the same reverence as I did at the time, because I was like, oh, I've experienced this. Let me play the game.
And I certainly feel like because I knew what the story was and how it was going to change, I wanted to get to that moment and see it again and see if it still felt good. Everything after that felt like such an anticlimax to me. And that's not necessarily just on me. I think it's partly on the game as well. Mm-hmm. We'll get to it later. But I feel like I was waiting for those moments so intently that everything else afterwards just felt anticlimactic because I was done with what I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Shall we just get into it then?
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were going to say something.
No.
Yeah, let's go.
I was thinking
Let's
of
get
anything
into it.
else we wanted to bring up, but we might as well go into it. So what we're going to do now is, and we will do on all of these episodes, is take you through the game with some, the key moments that have happened, and we will discuss them as we go along. So I've got a bunch of notes here, so I'm going to start reading them out. So if I don't sound like a normal human being talking anymore, it's because I'm reading a script. So obviously we start out on the plane with our protagonist Jack. He's talking about his parents and saying they'd always said he'd do great things. And very sudden. No, before we go further than that, this was apparently, according to the commentary, added in very late.
So repeat that again. Sorry.
So the whole
sorry to let you behind the curtain. There is that my dad's coming to help me fit a TV today, and I said I'll be around from about 3:30. Are you free? And he's like, yeah, we'll see you then. And then he's just sent me a text with one word and a lot of question marks, munting. And I'm like, what is he talking about? So that appeared, and then that totally threw me off because I'm like, I've got no idea what he's talking about here.
Okay,
that isn't a word. It's not even a Scottish word. It's just nonsense.
Is it not?
Anyway.
Okay, so
a munter is an ugly person.
Munting. Yeah.
So maybe he's going hunting ugly people.
I hope so. A friend of mine used to work at a company called Munters, and I mean that was endless sources of.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Right. So we start out on a plane. You got our protagonist Jack. He's smoking his cigarette. So it's clearly in the sort of 60s or late 50s.
1960, 8 or something. It's the earliest in the 60s. This game's set, right?
Yeah, because at one point you see something in the game where it says Happy New Year 1959. I think so. It's probably a few years on from that. Mm-hmm. So he's talking about how his parents always said he'd be doing great things. Now, on the commentary, they talk about the fact that this part of the game was added in very late because I think they didn't even have this cutscene initially. Apparently, you just started off in the water, and people had no idea what the hell was going on, and they didn't.
Yeah,
they didn't connect to anything because they didn't know who they were.
That cutscene looked so good in the day. Like that was probably the first time I can think of seeing like smoke rising from a cigarette and stuff like that.
Yeah. The funny thing is that this cutscene and the end cutscene are basically the only cutscenes that aren't in engine in the whole game, and yet their total time length must be less than a minute.
Yeah, that's true.
So very suddenly, the plane crashes before Jack wakes up in the sea amongst its burning wreckage. Miraculously, there's a lighthouse. Apparently, there's always a lighthouse within swimming distance. You climb the steps and enter the darkness before the lights flick on to reveal a statue of a man named Andrew Ryan towering above you, accompanied by a banner with the slogan of "No gods or kings, only man." You walk down some steps towards a bathysphere, pull the lever to be greeted by a short film explaining Andrew's vision and then his Jurassic Park-style reveal of Rapture in all its glory, which to me still felt very, very good.
Yeah, it's really well done. That the game is something that I think the game does very well, and this epitomizes it, is the sense of feel in place, which I think is really important in a game. Mm-hmm. And it's both impressive but also slightly intimidating as well because of the rundown nature of it in the dark. Like you know something's not quite right with it, obviously.
Yeah, it's become a dystopian sort of hellscape. But to think how impactful it feels when all they've really done is put a screen, like a TV screen, over Rapture so they can load it in the background. And they just have a man talk about, no, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. And then just pull it up and reveal all this like Art Deco, underwater whales, neon lights, whatever. That's classic stuff. That even if people just remember that part of this game, it's unforgettable, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really good.
So as David pointed out, when you arrive at the stop for the bathysphere, you can immediately realise that the city's gone to hell. You see a man getting sliced apart by a person with hooks for hands, who then tries to get in the bathysphere, and that's when you get introduced to Atlas, who comes over the radio and asks, "Would you kindly pick it up?"
I think I remember that being a really impressive thing. It's important to remember this game in context, because I think if you were a young person that never experienced this game when it came out, and then you picked it up and started playing it, I think it's maybe would be less impressive as it is without the context in mind. So like stuff like I can't think of another game that used and played upon sort of classic video game mechanics and used it and integrated it in the story certainly as effectively as this, because you like a lot of games, they'll make you pick something up, and until you do exactly what the game wants you to do, it won't progress. But they actually built a narrative purpose into that in this game, which I just think is fantastic. And I can't, again, it maybe has been done, but I can't think of an example of when this was done before, which just shows how important a game this was in its day.
Yeah, and speaking to that as well is the fact that this game has several endings. It has a couple of endings, which gives the player some agency of choice of what ending they're going to get. Ken Levine, again in the commentary, states how disappointed he was that he had to do that, and that was forced upon him by 2K, because the fact that the game giving you multiple endings and therefore giving you a choice kind of goes completely against the meta commentary of you don't have the choice. That's basically what the game's about, is that you have no choice. People say, would you kindly, and you've got to do what they say, and that is how we as the player are going to be doing it anyway, because we want to progress. So yeah, so weird that they forced him to do that. It's almost like they just didn't understand at all what he was trying to go for.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, actually, and because obviously I didn't know that, but what's interesting by that is I feel like it was in amongst the time where every game had a choice, and because like games were exploring, giving the player choice on how the game and like offering up multiple endings, it's a little bit, there's no nuance in it. It's either good or bad. There's no in between with it, which is a shame. But it's interesting that he never wanted that, because I feel like this is one of the games that sort of led that charge in multiple choice endings.
Yeah, and so from what I've just had a quick look at, Mass Effect, the first Mass Effect came out a few months after this, which was obviously massive on that aspect, but that was more heavily an RPG than this is.
Yeah, especially the first Mass Effect, that was very much an RPG, that game.
Yeah. So we go around the corner, we grab our first weapon, which is a wrench, and then shortly after that we get
I assume that's got some. Oh no, what is it in Half-Life? Is it a crowbar?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a good point actually. That could be a nod back to Half-Life.
I assume so. And
they must have been influenced by that, surely.
You have to be. I mean, every game is.
Yeah, it's a good point. And then we shortly after that we get our first plasmid, which is Electro Bolt. So they kind of hamper you with a terrible weapon, but then they give you this extra power, and they want to introduce that nice and early into the game, and they let you fry.
So that was the first point, and I'm hoping you can actually make it fit a bit better in my head. But that was the first point where the narratives, like, I'm just like, there's a little bit of a crack here. But what is it called? Is that the right word? The ludonarrative dissonance. Like, I don't see, like, if I was in that position, does he get told to jab himself in the arm? Because he just seems to do it.
Yeah, I think he does. I think Atlas says this is what you're going to need to help get yourself out of here. But after he does that, that's when he passes out, isn't it? He gets the power in his hand, he passes out, he falls over that rail, and then a big daddy and his little sister walk past you and sort of say, oh, he's still breathing, we'll get him later or whatever. So he clearly can't handle it at first, but Atlas does say, I don't think he says, would you kindly, but he definitely says...
I would imagine myself, if I got put in that position, the last thing I'd be thinking to do is just stab myself with an unknown concoction of drugs.
Yeah. And
this is not something I'd be doing.
That is another element that clearly we're going to be jumping around all over the place today.
Yeah.
But the ending of the game, the good ending of the game, where you see the guy clearly like an old man dying. Mm-hmm. I mean, with all the splicing he's done in his life, which is an element of Rapture that was purposely hidden away from modern medical science. How the hell they managed to cure him of all of that, and he doesn't end up turning into a mentalist, is quite impressive.
Yeah.
His immune system must be pretty hardcore. Well, maybe he was created. I'm spoiling it all. I'm spoiling all of it. So,
hopefully you've played this game if you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, you've had enough time now. So I've got just like a little note here that the early game was really heavy on sort of set pieces. So there's a plane that crashes into the pipe as you're walking through it. There's like architecture on fire falling down in front of you. Doors are bursting open with water and leaking everywhere. It starts off really kind of leaning on the horror element, I think, rather than just letting you get in there and shoot stuff because you're stuck with just a wrench.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's really feels like it's full of sort of jump scares and darkness, and the horror aspect of it is heavy in the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that's deliberate. It's probably one of the things that about this game that I think it still does well today is I remember when and I don't know why I remember this specific conversation, but when we were speaking about BioShock back in when it came out, I remember the feeling that although it was a shooter, usually I guess in shooters in those days felt like they were kind of power fantasies, or at least the ones I had played up to that point. Whereas this one, you always felt like you were about an inch from death. You were never going in and kicking ass. You were always just scrambling not to die to get on to the next part of the game. And I think that setup and that sort of almost horror like beginning of the game does a good job of portraying that to you. Like this isn't somewhere where you're just going to be all powerful and shoot everything. This is a dangerous place where you don't know what's going to be around the next corner, and you are going to struggle in places. And it's a tough game.
Yeah, and it can give you the illusion of that.
Yeah.
You know, you're always getting more and more plasmids and you're always speccing up your character, but the game does quite well in ramping up its difficulty spike with your progression as a character. Because by the end, so the last couple of areas you go to, even the regular splicers, they take a lot of punishment before they're going to go down.
Yeah, that's maybe one thing that I would offer as criticism for this game is at some point the enemies do become very bullet spongy. And there's not a lot of sort of feedback to the player that you're actually doing damage to some of these characters because they just sort of ignore your bullets until they die.
And there's not really any explanation as why.
No.
There's no reason why they're more powerful than the ones you saw at the beginning that take one hit from a shotgun and they're dead.
Yeah.
You just all of a sudden you've got the same splicers that take 20 shotgun blasts to the face and will still stand.
In a game where ammunition is an absolute premium.
Yeah. So where are we up to at this point? So this is where Atlas then explains that he has a family. He's been separated from them. They're in Neptune's bounty, and he wants you to go rescue them. You're his only hope to do so. You go through a hole in some gentlemen's toilets to walk out above sort of a theatre area, and you can see down below a little sister harvesting Adam from a corpse. Atlas then tells you these are the little sisters. He explains what Adam is. You drop down and then you watch through a glass window as a splicer tries to attack the little sister, and then the big daddy just completely wrecks him and spears him, punctures him into a wall. What do you think about the first? I mean, you get quite a few teases of the big daddies at the beginning of the game. What did you feel about the way they introduced that and the little sisters?
I really like the big daddies and the little sisters. They've got such a. We were talking about before being scrambling to be alive. Like, at no point in the game does a big daddy become a formality. They're always a threatening presence in the game, and choosing to take one on is a conscious choice. You don't just see one and think, "Oh, here goes the big daddy fight." I quite often was playing through this game, saw a big daddy, and decided just to leave it alone for a while because I just wasn't in a state that I felt I was able to take it on. And I like that, and I think the big daddies are the real standout in this game for me. We both played the remaster for this, and did you ever go and have a look in the museum where they in the main menu that they have added to the game?
No, I didn't.
So it's really interesting. You go in there and they've got concept art about the big daddies and like where they came from, and it's a really interesting sort of journey they went on to. One of the ones that actually ended up the original Big Daddy design actually ended up appearing in BioShock 2, and that was the one that had rockets for hands.
Yes. Yeah, because they were supposed to have 3 types, weren't they? But they cut them down to just the 2. Yeah.
Yeah, to just basically concentrate on the other ones and get them finished. And I thought that was interesting that they decided to cut that one. But the one bit actually that made me think about this is when you were talking about it. Originally, and right up to near the end, the Big Daddies had 2 drill hands or 2 gun hands, like basically 2 offensive arms.
Yeah.
Instead of having the one hand and the one like either gun or drill that they have in the finish game. The reason for that is that they wanted a way that the Big Daddies could interact with the little sisters.
Yeah.
So that that could create some sort of obviously because the big daddies have been brainwashed to look after these things. They just wanted some way to try and humanize it and humanize the little sisters, because that's, again, sorry if I'm jumping all over the place again, that's another thing that they spent a lot of time, according to this museum, doing, was that they originally, the little sisters didn't exist and they were just slugs that slithered about.
Yeah.
And they
how do you have empathy for a slug?
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly why they did it. They tried lots of things. The ones that I remember, well, obviously tried the slugs, and they were just finding that people didn't care. And then people were quite happy to carve them up. And then they even tried dogs in wheelchairs to try and elicit player empathy, which I'm glad they didn't do. And
I would say I would be more upset about dogs in wheelchairs than I would about little sisters.
Put me off the game, yeah.
Yeah.
So they ended up setting on little sisters, and then obviously the hand thing and removing an offensive weapon from the Big Daddy all built into that, because this I just thought it was an interesting journey of trying to elicit emotion from the players, that they would empathise with these.
It's a ballsy choice as well, because the unwritten rule of video games is you don't harm children in video games ever. Not even GTA. In GTA, there are no children. You can't run any children. You can't shoot them. You can't run them over because they don't exist in these games. So, although it's the harvesting part of the Little Sisters is largely not seen to the player, but to give the player an option to basically murder little children to become more powerful was a very gutsy choice that they somehow got away with.
It's a gutsy choice in some ways, but also such a, like, again, completely lacks nuance choice.
Oh, yeah.
Like, do you want to be a child killer or the savior of the universe? There's no in between.
Yeah, and there's also sort of, okay, so these slugs aren't working. Nobody seems to care. What can we do instead? Little girls! Kill little girls!
And there was funny though, it's like you can honestly see the thought process, because they're like the other option was like, what else do people care about? Dogs. People think dogs are really
crippled
cute. If this
dogs.
was a Japanese game, it wouldn't have been a dog, it would have been a cat.
Oh, yeah, it would have been and the dog would have been controlling it all, like at the end of Silent Hill 2.
Yeah,
because dogs are evil and cats are brilliant. So the end of that opening area begins with the first of many, and one of my biggest issues with this game, splicer gank attacks. So Andrew Ryan appears on a screen. He admonishes us for ruining his city, which I'm pretty sure he did a great job of him by himself.
Yeah.
And then so he's on this like film screen, isn't he, as you're at the door to go into the medical pavilion, and then the splicers try to break through the screen that you're watching Andrew Ryan on, but Atlas manages to open the door and we head into the medical pavilion. But the gank attacks become quite tiresome after a while. This is the first one, so it's not too bad because you're underpowered and it should feel that way, like a desperate escape. But the game, that's its favourite trick, I think, is here's the lights go off, shitloads of splicers come at you.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, yeah, you're right. It does get totally tiresome, but I thought that one instance actually worked quite well. Purely, I think, because it's the first one. But yeah, you're right. And the play dead mechanic got tiresome as well. Like,
there's no reason for that at all.
Every time you walk in, you see a body, like, you're not dead.
Well, and it doesn't really. There's some of the surprises lost because if you look at them, then your cursor goes red. It goes red so you can shoot them. And then sometimes they just talk. They just sort of start talking while they're lying down.
Talking about that, did you find that the audio, the instance audio in the game was a bit all over the place? Like, I would be walking in a room and I could hear a splicer speaking like they're right next to me. Yeah. But I think they were in the floor above.
Like, who even knows? But like, I mean, half the time, what pissed me off more than that is half the time they would appear behind you in a room you've just cleared.
Yeah,
I find that the AI mapping's really weird. But the worst noises
really
that they had was when they would always have like they'd have their little saying of what they were going to say. Usually this woman who's telling you're never going to make it or whatever. Oh, she's twice as ugly as me. She'll never make it. But then you just hear like scrabbling around and running, and it sounds, as you say, like they're right behind you, but there's nobody there.
Yeah.
It's
the only thing I could come up with is that there must be someone in a room adjacent to you that you can just hear.
Yeah. I think sometimes if you haven't entered a door yet, every time you walk in front of that door, it plays the sound that's behind that door really loudly for you to kind of alert you that there's people in there. But it does just sound like they're already in the room you're in.
the other thing, talking about, we're on that subject, the other thing that jumped out at me in the sort of, I'm assuming because it's just modern hardware and consoles come button up against an older game, but the sort of directional audio was so, but like all over the place as well. So like if you're wearing earphones, you would hear it on your right ear,
right?
If they were on your right, and if you turned the character model round,
yeah,
it would be right ear, right ear, right ear, right ear, boom, left ear. There was no sort of drift between the two. But I'm assuming that's just because it's an old game.
I guess so. I didn't use headphones for mine, so yeah, I can't speak to that. But yeah, that would be really disconcerting.
It was really off-putting, yeah.
So now we're in the medical pavilion. We're following the story of Dr. Steinman. So you could, obviously, this is where you're picking up loads of audio logs now for the rest of the game to hear the stories of all the different main characters. So his tapes reveal that he has this admiration for Andrew Ryan, for letting him sort of truly pursue medical science untethered thanks to Adam. He sees himself as the Picasso of surgeons. And then the game starts to get some sort of Metroidvania style elements to it. So in the crematorium, you go into this side room, you pick up the incinerate plasmid, and then you get, again, a gank attack comes at you, but you can fry there's loads of oil spilt in front of the door, isn't there? Mm-hmm. You have to crawl under a door, you set the oil on fire, all the splicers can't get in and get you. You can then use that to open frozen doors and blocked pathways.
Yeah.
And you go into a dental office and you get telekinesis, which you need to catch a grenade from a splicer on a balcony and then throw that into debris that's blocking the door of where you need to go. So I knew that the plasmids existed, but I knew that telekinesis bit was coming, but I sort of forgot about how much they gate off parts of your progression through addition of plasmids, which... Yeah,
I had forgotten that as well, and it's actually quite well done in hindsight. And the only thing I would have liked to see is maybe incentivize players to go back to older parts of the game and maybe make traveling between areas a bit easier, because really it is just one of these long corridor games that we've spoke about a few times, isn't it? Mm. But
yeah, I actually forgot until right near the end of the game that you could go into a Bathsphere station and could go anywhere that you'd been before.
Yeah, I think I had forgotten that until this second. As I was saying that, I was like, "You are talking rubbish, David." Yeah,
because there's a bit later on where you get the choice to go back later on and get a reward for something, and I kept thinking to myself, like, how have I got to walk all the way back to get that? So I googled it, like, how do you go back here? And it basically said just go to a Bathsphere station and select it. Oh yeah, basically really easy to fast travel.
Yeah, it's probably on me more than the game then, to be fair.
So we get another instance here where you get the lights turned off and a mob of splicers trying to attack you, but this is near the entrance to Dental, and you get the shotgun, which at this point I guess you've only got a pistol and a wrench, haven't you? So this is where you pick up the shotgun. So it's keeping the mix pretty I guess parallel to itself, within you getting new guns and plasmids kind of at a similar rate.
Yeah, I actually think for me the shotgun's both one of the best weapons in the game and the worst weapons in the game. The best, like, I think, again, another criticism I would have of the game, I think in a modern context, a lot of the weapons feel like they lack weight. Like, I always think of, like, the Destiny shotgun or the Halo guns, in that, especially the Halo shotgun, and, like, when you pull the trigger, it feels like you've got this big meaty weapon.
Yeah.
And actually, the one gun that I think actually manages to pull off meatiness in the game is the shotgun, but it doesn't translate into the actions of the people you're shooting. So, like, the gun feels meaty, but the actual reaction of the characters that you're shooting, I think, lacks the meatiness, I think, eventually in the game.
It almost seems like it's purposely trying to make you combine everything. Yeah. So you're not going to get a good amount of damage, or you're not going to get that reaction from the enemies unless you plasmid them first and then follow up with a weapon.
And that's, I guess, like, to build on that, that's another thing I wanted to mention it yesterday when I was finishing off this game, is that it's a shame, and almost it's partly on me and partly I think on the game. Like, it wasn't until I was almost finished the game that I realised, oh wait, you get a far better result in terms of shooting enemies if you make sure you choose the right bullets. So like if you've got someone that's an armored enemy, make sure you're using armored bullets, and if you've got anti-personnel bullets, use them against the splicers, because it really does tear them up.
Yeah.
The problem with that is the game is so frantic, it's difficult to actually stop and think about that while you're in the moment fighting. And also ammo is such a scarcity in the game for me, or at least it was for me. Maybe I just can't hit my shots, but it's such a scarcity that even though I knew that was a thing, it almost didn't matter, because I didn't have the right ammo for the job anyway, or I didn't have enough ammo for the job anyway. So it's both a great thing and a shame, really.
Yeah, and not hitting your shots actually does speak quite well to the fact that the aim down the sights in this game is piss poor. Yeah, it's so bad. Yeah, the only gun in which you can actually get any accuracy through aiming down the sights with is the crossbow. Mm-hmm. Which
I really like that gun as well.
Actually. Oh, that will one shot an enemy even towards the end of the game if you can hit them with it, especially if they're running from bees or on fire. Yeah, that's I think I took a couple of cool clips of me doing that, sort of getting some long range snipes, or somebody walks at me, they're running at me, and I just flame and then one shot them in the head with a bolt. That was pretty cool.
Was the flame your plasmid of choice? I ended up using the electricity has tended to be my one.
I feel like the electricity is one that I use quite a lot. The biggest disappointment, I think, in terms of the plasmids is the fact that the freeze one, you get loads of these plasmids that talk about like, once you've frozen them, if you hit them with a wrench or whatever, it does more damage. But I remember I tried that towards the end, and I froze a guy and I hit him with a wrench, and it took off the smallest sliver of his. Because I think once they're frozen, right, they get an extra bar, like a frozen health bar, don't they? And you've got to whittle that bar down, and they'll basically just explode in a But I found that was really difficult to get through. Like 4 shotgun shots before you have to reload would not do it.
Yeah.
I felt like that should. If you think about a game like Duke Nukem, once you freeze an enemy, you just kicks them and they explode. So, and that was the biggest shame for me. But I after I got bored of the electro bolt thing, especially because they were getting zapped every time they hit me anyway, I started using the fire quite a lot towards the end. Mm-hmm. I did find it fun to use telekinesis as well and pick up corpses off the floor and throw them at other enemies. I wish I'd done that more.
I think the reason I ended up using the electricity one is there's a lot of water about, but also because you spend so many time doing hacking puzzles. If I walked into a room, I used to like to basically take over all the turret guns, and an electro bolt basically lets you zap it and then run up on it and do a hack.
Which I misconstrued in my head as zap everything and it's easier to hack it.
Ah, right, okay.
But you're supposed to freeze it.
So and it makes it easier to hack.
It makes the thing go slower if you freeze it first. So I forgot that, and I kept zapping everything, like even safes. I was like, "What? It's still really hard to hack it. I've zapped it. What are you talking about?" So that's what you're supposed to do. Apparently, is use the freeze bolt on anything, and it will slow the hacking water transfer thing down.
Where were you 10 hours ago?
Yeah, but the telekinesis using that was probably almost always an accident, because I'd used it to pick up something far away and forgot to change back, and an enemy just ran at me and I tried to zap him and I ended up just doing telekinesis by accident. Thank God the plasmid and gun wheels pause the game, because otherwise that game would be impossible.
Yeah.
There is nothing in the AI that isn't leg it at this man and hit him as hard as you can from all angles. Right, where are we up to? So we get some introduction as well in this area to Dr. Suchong, who developed all the plasmids. Mm-hmm. And at this point, we still haven't fought a Big Daddy yet. So you go through to Steinman's surgery through a tube, and that's when you see on the other tube, there's a parallel adjacent tube to you, where you can see a Big Daddy hulking along with his little sister next to him. This, they build these things up as this pervasive threat that's going to be everywhere you go. So we've touched on this before. This is where you get into his surgery by catching the grenade with telekinesis, blowing away the door. And by the time you get to Steinman's surgery room, he's clearly gone totally insane, and he's got this corpse on a table. He's hacking away at it, talking about how ugly she was, and he's got these strung up patients that he turns lights on. They're in the ceiling, and he shines spotlights on these people that have been hanged, saying that this one was too ugly, this one was too fat, too tall. Yeah, he screams at how ugly we are, and then just whips out a machine gun, and the battle begins. So I think there's some elements in this where you can set the floor on fire, you can zap him, you can throw loads of objects at him. I can't remember what I used as my technique. I probably just was, as you said, totally into zapping stuff at this point.
Yeah.
So I probably did that. But this is the first kind of boss battle, I guess, that we have in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember much about it?
Yeah. It was good. It's probably, I'm trying to think of like the ones that are jumping out in terms of boss battles in my head is that one. Then there's the actually I shouldn't jump ahead, but the one that I actually remember liking was when you meet what's the guy called that does the entertainment stuff with the on stage things?
Sander Cohen.
Yeah, he's the one I remember enjoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually kind of struggled to come up with a lot to say about this. The only pervasive memory I have of this section is when you're talking about using the telekinesis to catch grenades. It took me too long to remember that's what I was meant to do.
It's not a very memorable battle, to be honest. It's just a guy with a gun. His setup is quite cool because you see him through the glass and he screams at you and he's gone nuts. But in terms of the actual fight, it's really just a more powerful enemy with a machine gun. Yeah,
and actually, to an extent, I quite like that for the most part, BioShock sticks to this. But when you come to these boss battles, and this guy's an example of it, in a lot of video games, what they'll do is they'll give you a bunch of normal enemies and then they'll just have a bigger guy that has explosions. And they'll add him and make him the boss, whereas this guy is just a normal dude.
Yeah. And I guess that's all of Rapture,
and I like
really.
that, yeah. And I like that. I like the game that within its own world, it's consistent.
Yeah, because
and that's just an example of that.
What would actually make him a more powerful enemy? He's a doctor with a gun.
Yeah.
He's got nothing else.
Yeah. Like, you've almost done what makes him a more powerful enemy, i.e. got through his area.
Yeah, exactly.
His power is the people seems to be in charge of, or his sort of dangerous zone.
His
intellect
when you get as well, to him, I guess. Yeah. So when you've sort of come up against that and already done it, just getting on and killing him, I think, works well. Yeah. So we get the key off of him to the emergency access, which was where we've been trying to go this whole time to get to Neptune's bounty. As we exit the surgery, you get a tunnel collapsing. Atlas says that Rapture's a piece of shit. And then you see a Big Daddy come flying through a glass window in this smouldering heap. His little sister is left now by herself, and she has to try and fend off this splicer who is about to kill her until he gets shot in the head from a balcony by Tenenbaum, who pleads with you to spare her.
Right, yeah.
But Atlas comes through on the radio and says she's the reason that the little sisters are as they are. And one of Steinman's audio logs as well actually explained that Tenenbaum's ideal was that it wasn't like killing them to remove this sea slug from them. It was more like removing a terminal patient from life support. So Tenenbaum as a character is definitely she's got a very divisive nature about her. She is clearly the reason that these little sisters are how they are. She was big behind the project for it, but she now totally regrets what she's done and asks you to help her out. And she chucks you this plasmid that you can use to either, to heal the little sisters rather than harvest them.
Yeah, what's your feelings on that? Like, it wasn't until this morning when I was reminding myself of the story that I realised that that's what she did. So, like, I'm not the best person on this section. I don't think, for some reason in the moment, I never clicked that it was a plasmid that was allowing you to remove this stuff.
I forgot about that as well, yeah.
Because I was looking at it thinking, how am I just healing these people like some sort of Jesus? Yeah. But there is actually a narrative reason for it, so that's my bad again.
Yeah. And that's obviously this choice will then carry on through the rest of the game of if you decide to harvest or heal the little sisters.
Which again is another thing that is maybe worth of criticism of the game. And
agreed.
Like we were speaking about it before, and like I watched the bad ending, and then the bad ending is so bad. Like you are this like almost Dr. Evil cartoon villain that just goes on a rampage through just like to take over Earth.
I don't understand that. Because,
but would you get that ending if I just didn't save one little sister?
I think it's one, or it might be two. I don't know. I think it's basically there's two different bad endings. There's one where she's like super pissed at you,
Right.
And there's one where she's disappointed in you, but she says the same things just in a different tone.
Ah, right, okay. Because I was watching this thinking, like, that is harsh. If you miss one little sister throughout the whole game,
Yeah.
I'm getting this ending. I was like, that's a bit harsh.
Especially as
you're
you're supposedly going to get more resources from doing it. And really, the way you've progressed through all of Rapture and everyone who's against you, you're not playing it outside of the little sisters. You don't play it as an evil character. But as you say, at the end, if you've harvested a couple of them, you start a fucking nuclear war. You unleash splicers on the surface world and then launch a nuke. I mean, if I knew that's what I was playing for, I mean, I didn't realise I was playing for, like, Dictator Sim. Very strange. But again, that's another thing Levine didn't like. He said, obviously, the good ending is what he really wanted to have, but they were forced, for some reason, to have a choice of endings by the publisher.
That's odd. I'm really surprised by that. Super surprised, given, well, we've already spoken about it, given that it seems to be one of the poster kids for multiple choice endings.
But then again, Levine doesn't work for that company anymore and could quite easily throw the publisher under the bus for something that wasn't true.
To an extent, I feel like the ending, this is a different podcast maybe, but the ending to BioShock Infinite is him throwing the publisher under the bus.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that on another day, no doubt.
Maybe we will. After this saving of a little sister, we very quickly then have our first Big Daddy fight, who is a bouncer version. So he's the one who will charge you relentlessly. He can send you flying across the room. He doesn't attack you until you provoke him.
That is so disorientating, by the way, when you get bounced across the room. Yeah, try to figure out where you've landed.
Yeah,
and regroup. Yeah,
yeah, and he's not going to wait for you to get your bearings again. He's coming straight for you again. I mean, especially if you've got the static discharge plasmid as well. Then you get all these flashing blue lights across the screen as he's smashed you apart. But it's definitely more of a boss fight than Steinman was. This is these are obviously a pervasive, perennial boss fight that you can have multiple times throughout the game. Still cool that he doesn't attack you until you provoke him, though.
Yeah. No, I like that about the Big Daddies in general. Unless you, sometimes the odd one would get annoyed if you got too near them. But for the most part, you could just ignore them. There were these, like, because they were so dangerous, for the most part, they were boss fights that you could choose when and if to engage, which I really, really liked, because they were so brutally difficult at times and such a threat. But it was a threat that almost on all occasions you brought upon yourself. And
they, despite the fact that they have this horrible wailing, growling noise, they are really sympathetic characters. Especially as you get towards the end of the game, you realise how all these have basically just been brainwashed, indoctrinated, normal people who have been forced to do this. But even when watching them around the world, having caring for these little girls, just getting about their business, don't want anything to do with you unless you go after the little sister or whatever. The subtle sort of environmental storytelling they use to purvey these as sympathetic is really well done.
And I'm guessing the sort of melancholic wail noises they make is deliberate, because on one hand they are like the big hulking beast of Rapture, and I guess in the same way like a whale, like. But for the most part, if you just leave them alone, they're not dangerous, even though they could just rip you apart without even trying.
A whale is a good analogy, yeah.
And I just think that whole imagery it brings up, like the noise, it's quite a sad noise as well. And then when you know that these things are like welded into their suits and brainwashed, Jesus. Like it is quite a sad experience. So I think that whole thing around the Big Daddies is really, really well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And they never, I mean, they obviously start off by showing the Big Daddy killing that splicer, but they never paint them to be these evil things walking around, which is cool. So after we've done that, we get through to Neptune's bounty. We're immediately greeted by this crucified corpse with a smuggler labelled above him.
That's right, yeah. This is the camera section, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Okay. Which obviously is easiest to do for the Big Daddies, because you can just walk right up in their face and take a photo of them. They don't seem to mind that. Atlas tells us we're headed to Fontaine Fisheries, which is the first mention of Fontaine's name. and as soon as you go through one of the first doors, we'll get a fight with a Rosie Big Daddy, which are the ones that have proximity mines, this rivet gun. I think at this point as well, splicers are actually trying to attack him when you first see him. So you'll go a little bit further forward and you'll see all these splicers trying to gank up on this Rosie. But these ones suck because their rivet gun will absolutely chew you up.
Mm-hmm. Can you remind me what the guy's name is, the big bad?
Frank Fontaine.
Is it Fontaine, the bald guy? That's his name?
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah. So that's one thing that I never realised about this game again until I started going back and researching the story. Is that, so and I think it's just something I'd forgotten over the years, that he's essentially like the mafia boss of Rapture. And
yeah,
it seems like, so he used to be in charge of the smugglers and stuff, so that when you come out and you see the hanged smugglers, they are so eventually at some point Fontaine starts to demand an 80% cut to smuggle stuff into Rapture.
Mm-hmm.
And people that didn't want to pay that essentially got hung and outed as being smugglers. So they're people that refuse to pay the sort of Fontaine his cut, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, and they paint it at the beginning as that Andrew Ryan was so afraid of anybody coming from the outside into Rapture that's why smugglers had to be severely punished and made an example of. But more likely it's because they were in cahoots with Fontaine, his biggest nemesis, that he has that. It's quite interesting as well to note that some of the smugglers that are like strung up or whatever, they've got Bibles underneath them. And Rapture is obviously a place that is free of religion, but clearly people couldn't handle not having that around, so they were actually smuggling in Bibles to, I guess, give people their hit of Jesus when they
Jesus
needed it.
hit.
Yeah. We go under some docs at one point. We can get our first audio diary from Sullivan, and he does a bit of foreshadowing where he explains that Ryan made it so that the Bath spheres have been locked down genetically to only his genetic relatives and associates, which was some foreshadowing of our character, I assume.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But at this stage is where I told you yesterday, where the Rosie just completely ruined me because I was playing the game on hard, and on hard it is ridiculous.
Oh, really?
The Bath spheres, obviously, they don't reload a checkpoint. They just bring you back to life. So if you've used up all your health and ammo trying to kill a Big Daddy,
that's a son of a bitch.
You come back with no health and ammo. You just got to go back and grind it up again. So I put it back on medium at this point because it was ridiculously hard, and it's hard on medium. It's not an easy game.
It's no mess in that game.
I remember when I first played it, I played it on easy because I got so badly wrecked at the beginning of the game. But this time, don't play it on hard unless you're mental, because I'm pretty sure there was an achievement to play it on hard and turn off Bath spheres.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so then you're talking about coming back from, I don't know, save scumming, I guess.
Yeah.
Who knows? So at this point as well, you get your first, if you've kept healing the little sisters, this is where you will get your first reward from Tenenbaum. Of a little sister will bring a bear to the Gatherer's Garden, and it will give you money. Usually gives you some sort of special ammo and a shitload of Adam. Now, in the commentary, Levine says that you do still get slightly less, but he doesn't really like the fact that this is part of it as well, because he doesn't make the choice that agonizing whether you harvest or heal them at this point or at any point, because you're eventually every 3 that you heal, you get a massive wodge of Adam. So he really wanted it to feel much more agonizing to do the right thing, and hope that players would just do the right thing because of their humanity. But really, the punishment for doing that isn't enough to deter you from just being evil.
No.
Which is a shame.
Yeah.
But I was grateful for it because I wanted the good ending, and you need the Adam because you just there's so many slots and upgrades you can get that you'd be so underpowered without.
It's one of these things that this sort of mechanic is maybe not great for games, because you want players to get the upgrades and get the plasmids to have fun with them, But in a way, to have the good ending or the canon ending, you've got to limit your exposure and access to Adam, which then gives you the upgrades and stuff. It's a weird. It would have been nice to find a way around that still let people mess about. I suppose you do get enough, but I didn't unlock everything in my playthrough.
I assume that's probably what helped him come to terms with the choice in the end.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, it will just ruin your experience as a player. There's an empathetic and moralistic element to this, but that doesn't always translate into a fun video game. And it would not be fun if you didn't get 260 Adam every 3 that you've healed.
Exactly.
The area itself, I quite like this area actually. It's all kind of boardwalks, and you got overhanging like hooks and harpoons everywhere, and all this sort of fishing paraphernalia. This is one of my favourite areas to kind of look at. We get to Fontaine Fisheries itself, where we meet Peach Wilkins, this kind of stuttering, he seems like a simple person who won't open the door until you get a research camera from the Wharf Master's office. He gives you a grenade launcher to help you, because this is the first time you get spider slicers, the ones that crawl across the ceiling. So he gives you a grenade launcher to help you out with this. But this thus begins the research mechanic. How do you feel about the research mechanic?
I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I just thought it just wasn't fun to. I didn't find it fun to engage with, and I found that like if I was going around trying to take pictures of things, I was getting hit and getting shot before I was actually able to whip my gun out and stuff. And I find it also maybe that, again, I'm happy to say this is probably just me, but I couldn't always work out what I had taken pictures of and what I still had to take pictures of. So I ended up just taking a lot of the same pictures of the same enemies over and over again.
There's nothing worse than spamming the picture button and it going, you're not seeing it because the text is right in the corner that says you've already done this. There's nothing more to do. So
I think I engaged with it quite heavily for that area, and then I didn't touch it again after I left.
Yeah, so this is one of the heaviest RPG elements of the game, I think, because if the more you take the photos, the more an experience you get from doing it, you eventually do get plasmids from it, and you also get damage bonuses towards the enemies.
Maybe that's
as well.
why I had such a difficulty with having spongy enemies, because I just wasn't engaging with that side of the game.
Yeah, quite possibly, because by the end you get like 2 times damage or whatever it is to all of them.
Yeah. But then on the flip of that, that's probably my fault, but on the flip of that is to say, I was like, another mechanic which I ended up absolutely despising was the hacking mechanic, and I had to engage with that, and it made me like the game less because I was continually having to, I mean, especially in the last area, I feel like I was hacking stuff every minute. I was having to hack something, and being forced to engage with a section of the game that I didn't enjoy or was just bored of, wasn't great.
I don't like the camera either. It's a weird. Mechanically, it's just too fiddly. If there was a button to whip out the camera rather than having to go through the wheel and select the camera and then go back to your gun, then fair enough. But because you have to
just
completely
a dedicated
hamper
camera
yourself,
button even would have made it slightly better.
Exactly. But the incentives to do it are there, but the way that it ruins the combat experience, as you decided, was just not worth going through.
Yeah. Did you stick with it, or did you give up on it?
Purely because I wanted the extra plasmids and bonuses.
You stuck with it?
Yeah. I didn't max it all out. And I remember I tried to get all the achievements on the Xbox version of this, so I remember trying to go back and take photos of all of them, especially by the time you get to it. Another problem I have with this is it doesn't tell you what level you're at in terms of, I think there's 3 levels of research you can do for each one, something like that. Yeah. It never tells you which one you're at. And by the time you get to the 3rd one, the amount of XP you actually get from taking photos is just nothing. And it takes so long. Especially if you're trying to photograph them when they're dead, it just won't let you do it. There's a little moment here where Peach says if he smells Fontaine on you, you're not allowed in. And then Atlas comes on the radio and says Fontaine is dead, which, we all know is not the truth. We go to the Wharf Master's office, we get the camera, and that's when we start doing all this researching. When you've taken enough photos of the spider splicers, which is quite hard to say, you get a call from Atlas to go back to Peach. And then naturally, once Peach lets you inside, he accuses you of working with Ryan, begins to attack you. And I fucking hate this boss fight. It's an absolute mess. He's got sentry bots. He's throwing Molotovs at you. There's splicers everywhere. He's already made you give up your weapons to get in, so you've got no weapons. You can get them off of the corpses. Right, yeah. I think the only weapon you can really get is a pistol off of one of the dead guys, but you basically have to just use your plasmids. You basically have to hack the sentry bots to try and scrounge as much health and evo tonics from the surrounding freezer areas. But this fucking sucks so hard. I died so many times on this boss fight, even on medium, because it's just you can't even go back and get your guns until it's ended.
Yeah,
good way of getting challenged, but the difficulty spike is insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this game does this from time to time. It's just there'll be an insane difficulty spike, and then it'll go back to normal again. Mm-hmm. And this is just one of those. I guess this is probably the most glaring example.
I would say so. Yeah, the fact you've got no weapons at all. Because I remember I was just trying to freeze them. Does nothing. Not freeze them. Zap them. You can't kill the enemies with that. You only stun them. So basically, you're just never doing any damage until you get onto the turrets. And if you blow the turrets up or whatever, or they get destroyed, if you smash them with a wrench, I don't know why you do that, but yeah, you've got no way of attacking anybody. So after we've dealt with Peach and all of his mates and all of his turrets, you move through the freezer area, you melt the ice with the incinerate plasmid to carve a path to the smuggler's hideout, where he promises to meet you up ahead. So you head through these flooded storage caves towards the submarine control room. This is where Atlas says his family are waiting, and then Ryan comes on the radio, tells you or warns you you'll know what it's like to be his enemy if you help Atlas any further. You press the button to open the submarine to release Atlas's family, but instead you get locked in the control room. I think Atlas is actually down there. I think he's the one who runs out and says, "Open the thing." That's how I saw it.
Yeah, that's why I saw it too.
Yeah. So he's down by the submarine, and then you get your view obscured because some big girder kind of falls in front of the window, so you can't see him anymore. He then starts yelling that he's been attacked by splicers. And you've got to fight your way down to him as Ryan taunts you that you're only going to be able to watch Atlas die. And then when you finally reach the submarine, it explodes. And Atlas has a big cry. Thoughts on this part?
If Atlas has the ability to make you do whatever he wants, why does he concoct this story to make you care about what's happening and think he's a good guy?
I have absolutely no idea. You've just ruined the whole game. I think the podcast is over. That's such a good point. What? Yeah. He does.
Just like, would you kindly not find a cure for would you kindly?
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, I wonder why. It's almost like it's... if he didn't believe in the programming of your mind, despite the fact that he created you and programmed your mind and has already proven that it works by making you pick up the radio, then yeah, you're right. He didn't really need to... It's purely a narrative device for the player.
He's just got a bit of a flair for drama, does old...
Yeah. He likes doing his Irish accent. He hasn't used it for a while. He's going to give it a go out for the day.
It's like, I've been down here alone all the time. I'm going to make my own drama play.
Wow, what a good point. Oh, man. That's good. So after this, we move through to Arcadia. Atlas is obviously really upset and pissed off and wants us to kill Ryan now. So we start off in this graveyard area.
Yeah, so sorry, back on that. Did Ryan do that then? Or did he manufacture that?
I think... Oh. Well, Ryan is the one who's threatened you. He's the one who's taunting you on the radio at the time. So I assume yes.
Yes.
I assume he believes that Atlas is who Atlas is. Because there's posters everywhere about Atlas. There's messages that come on with a Rapture reminder.
Yeah, it must
kind
be.
Of stuff. Like siding with Atlas is siding with the parasite and all that kind of stuff. He's a big motif of the enemy in the game. So I guess Ryan's been fooled as well.
I assume so.
And maybe the only reason behind... Oh, no, because at the end of the game, obviously, Fontaine keeps saying, "Oh, we could have ruled this place together, kid." But he was pretending to be somebody else when he's trying to be on your side. So if he's trying to get you to believe in him, then he's doing it. He's hoodwinking you there as well. So yeah, I really don't get his motivations behind the Atlas part. That is a very good. I'd love to just speak to Ken Levine and be asked that question. Why doesn't he just say, "Would you kindly go up and kill Andrew Ryan and then come and hang out with me?"
Yeah.
Would you kindly launch that nuke we've apparently got next to Rapture, please?
Yeah, we're just keeping that.
Yeah.
And so
yes.
were the family a complete...
No. I don't think there's anybody in there.
No.
Because you can go up there beforehand. You can go straight to the control room, or you can actually go to the sub itself. And there's nothing going on, but Atlas comes on the radio. He's like, "Oh, can you hear them? Are they making any noise in there at all?" As if he's trying to say, "Oh, it must be really hard to hear them because they're in a submarine. That's why it's quiet." I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Very strange. So then we're off into Arcadia, which is like the garden area of Rapture. Mm-hmm. We start off in a graveyard, which is always nice. There's some corpses you can obviously loot. We go into this big tea garden, and it's got loads of benches people were sitting on and colourful foliage. I think at this point as well, you get the explanation of the ghosts that I'd completely forgotten were in this game, but that something to do with your plasmid ability now allows you to see the memories of other people through the genetics. Gene splicing that's involved in creating plasmids means that you now got genes of dead people that you can see as ghosts sitting on benches in a park. One of my favourite parts of this area is you can go into the employees only room, and there's some moron in there who set up loads of steel traps and just run through them as soon as you walk in, which is great. They're electrified trap things. You just go straight into that. And this is where you get introduced to the crafting mechanic. Although if you've killed enemies before you go in this room, you'll have been picking up like fucking hose pipes and empty plasmid tonic things, little vials. And I remember thinking that was really weird at the time. Like, I've killed a guy, and why the fuck am I getting scraps of shit off of this dude? What's this for? And then I remembered that you have to do the crafting, and that's when I kind of remembered that the RPG elements in this game were way stronger than I remembered.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on the crafting? To me, it felt a little bit just kind of chucked in there.
Yeah, it was something that always sort of just existed in the background that I never really gave much thought to. Like, if crafting materials appeared, I collected them, and then when I came up in an area I could craft stuff, I just crafted what I could and moved on. I never actually thought about it or engaged in it in any way. I
think my biggest issue with it is that there is no logic or manipulation to what materials you get at all. It's just completely randomized.
Totally. I think, like, for games like that use crafting as a central mechanic, there needs to be a way of thinking, right, I want to build these types of bullets.
Yeah.
This is what I need. And then there's a way to go and farm what you need. Yeah. There's no way to do that. It's just what have I lucked into finding.
Yeah.
You can't just go looking for a rubber tube. You can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. You go to the U-Invent machine, and hopefully you've got some stuff you can make. And if you have, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems that I think the game could have... I don't think the game would have been negatively affected if they just yanked that out.
And after a while, it sort of becomes, to me, it takes away from the mystique of Rapture a little bit. Like, why the fuck were people making ammo in Rapture all the time? What do you need that for? In the employees only room,
you don't need guns.
of the garden area of a utopia, you've got a gun, you've got an ammo making machine.
Yeah.
What? So,
although it's an American game made by an American, so
good
I guess.
Good point. Yeah, what are you going to do without Walmart selling guns? Well, we'll make our own. Good point.
There are definitely guns in heaven.
As you approach the lower rolling hills part of this is where Ryan releases the gas into the air to kill all the trees, which will then starve all the citizens of Rapture from oxygen, and it causes a lockdown because of the low levels, so we can't get to the metro area. And at this point, on Atlas's advice, we go and meet Julie Langford, who was basically the head gardener. She's the one who created Arcadia in the first place. Mm-hmm. She will help us get the trees back to life, but before that, we get one of our, I think it's the first of many fetch quests in the game.
Who causes the trees to die? Who did that? Who's trying to commit suicide?
Ryan does that.
And is he just sort of, is his thinking at that point just, this is not savable, let's just take everyone down?
I think he says it. He definitely says it later on when he does the self-destruct thing, but I think he says it at this point as well, where if you're going to take if you're trying to take my city, I'm going to we'll all die. You're not taking it.
If I can't have it, nobody can have it, sort of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
she first of all asks us to go get this Rosa gallica. It's like a big plant that you've been able to go and look at before, but couldn't take it, but now you can. So you have to backtrack there. Once you've done that, you go back to her office to give it to her. But as she's in there, Ryan gasses her to death, because of course he does.
Yep.
So she can't then complete this Lazarus vector to bring the trees back to life. So we have to then do it by searching for all these components that we can get from the farmer's market. Which
So I was so sorry to put a pin in that, and we'll come right back to it. I've got a quick question though. So it's like one thing that always jumped out to me in BioShock is that I don't think you ever really spend any time in a room with a person that's not aggressive.
and if you do, they get gassed to death before you can go in there.
Well, so but even at that point with her, you're looking at her through a window.
Yes. Yeah.
And the only person that I can think that you're in a room with that isn't aggressive is Ryan, and that's an odd cutscene, and I actually found myself looking at the sort of movement and behavioural patterns of her and people you're in the same room as, and it actually is the way she moves and sort of cowers while she's getting gassed is actually very similar to a splicer. I wonder if the AI just doesn't have regular human movement in the game, because like even her walking around, they've obviously put in walking around because they have that, but the way she cowers is even similar to the way the splicers move, and I wonder if it's just like a slowed down version of that.
Maybe.
Because it doesn't seem to serve any sort of story purpose that they never put you in the same room as anyone.
Yeah, because even later on in Tenenbaum's safe house, she's through another window.
Yeah.
She's just walking back and forth, talking to you that way.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's just because they haven't got cam AI in the game.
And I think the second game, which wasn't the same development team, but they do have a lot more face-to-face human interaction in that game from what I can remember. So maybe that was something they wanted to rectify. But it's a good point. Maybe you could somehow tie it to the fact that this is a utopia built for the key sort of industrialist society of great thinkers and workers and whatever, and they all look down on you, or everybody has this sense of self-entitlement that they don't feel the need to have any human contact. I don't know, but that's probably just stretching a little bit. And you're right, it probably is just development,
just technical limitations. I wonder. Yeah. I wonder if technically you're just watching a cutscene. I don't know. I don't understand it. Because there just seems to be no real reason for it.
Yeah.
But there must be something. Because it's an odd thing to. That's an active decision. In development.
Maybe it's because they had to keep it all in engine. It was just easier and quicker to do it this way.
Yeah. Do you think? Yeah. No. They were all maybe worried players would try and shoot. Maybe if they would have to make characters like that invincible. So
yeah, that's always
maybe they thought that would take you away from pull you out of the game.
Especially as in some circumstances, we're basically just a homicidal maniac who wants to just completely commit worldwide genocide by the end of the game, having killed all the little girls. So yeah, it's probably a good idea. Farmer's market. Sorry, we're on to the farmer's market, which Langford thankfully has a key for in her pocket, which was super handy. This is a really lame part of the game, in my opinion. So this is basically just a giant fetch quest.
Yeah.
So your first port of call there is to go to this like winery, and it's basically just a labyrinth. It's like an endless maze of brown cellars where you're trying to get all this distilled water, and you can hear drunk splicers everywhere crying and saying sorry to their dad and Jesus and all this kind of stuff. And this is a really prominent area where I found that, as you said, you had no idea where anybody was, but they sounded like they were right next to you. The other part of this is the Silver Wing Apiary, where you've got to turn on this smoke to keep these bees in their hives and then go grab enzymes from the hives. And every time you go and grab an enzyme, splicers attack you. And the smoke is on a timer. So you've got to run in, grab the enzyme, kill the splicers, and get out before you get beed to death.
Yeah.
Which was not fun. I'm sure you'd probably agree there.
No, I agree with you. I really don't have much to add. It's just not a very good part of the game, I don't think.
And it's weird as well that in this part of the game, you don't get introduced to the bee plasmid that way. And something I was going to bring up earlier is that after a while, the mechanical reasons within the game to get the plasmids just goes completely out the window. The Metroidvania aspect of it is totally gone. And all of a sudden you'll go to a gatherer's garden and there's like 20 different plasmids in there, all of a sudden, just chucked in. Like, oh, there's a bee one, and oh, you can enrage people, and oh, you can hypnotize the Big Daddy and stuff. It just seems like they had so many ideas for this, but ran out of ways to introduce it logically into the plot that they just went, go over there, there's shitloads of them.
Yeah, I think the bee one's a really strange one as well, because so you can manifest bees from Adam out of your skin.
I mean, I love the way his hand looks when he brings it out. It's all like blistered and shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it never really worked for me. I tried to use that. I even had the bee thing +3 or whatever it is, and it still never really seemed to bother the splicers. Certainly in the end game, they didn't give a shit if they were on fire, so why are they going to care about bees?
Yeah, exactly. It's a shame.
It is a shame. So this is when we go back to the Langford's office, obviously through hordes of splicers. And then when you create the Lazarus vector, this is where Ryan then calls in a whole host of these goons to come and get you. And Atlas then tells you to lock the door and seal the door to the lab, and you've basically got a tower defense part. Now, for me, in this section, there's a fucking Big Daddy in her office. So when I sealed the door, I sealed the Big Daddy in there. And all the while, I'm getting totally done in by this horde mode of splicers. And this Big Daddy's just walking back and forward, banging on the wall to get a little sister that come out that never comes out. And then eventually, obviously, I accidentally shot the bastard. And then he's part of it as well.
In other parts of the game, you can really set the Big Daddies off against the splicers.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. Because the hypnotized Big Daddy thing is fucking terrifying. Because every time you chuck it at them, they just leg it right at you and stand next to you. Yeah. Horrible.
And I don't know if I was finding as well when I used it, when they came out of it, they knew what had happened, and they weren't. I don't know if I was accidentally shooting them in like the melee. So like,
yeah,
I would use it. They'd be useful, and then it would wear off, and I'd be like, oh, I need to fucking get out. This thing is going to come for me now because I've obviously angered it.
Yeah, I don't know if it must be because of an accidental shooting, because I remember I had at least one time where he didn't attack me afterwards. He was just kind of like, what? And then just walked off.
Go back to it, yeah. I must have just been spraying around like a madman.
But the fact that they run up and stand next to you kind of, to me, made them feel less effective, because sometimes I'd be standing there getting shot and thinking, go over there and deal with them. Yeah. And they wouldn't. They would just stand next to me. And they'd always fire like proximity mines, and then the splicers would already be attacking me. So it's like, they're not going to go over there, are they, you bellend? But yeah, that was just a little funny thing I had where I'm stuck in this sealed-in office with a Big Daddy just trying to patiently get a little sister. Yeah, so after I dealt with the splicers and the collateral damage of the Big Daddy, you can then restore the trees, which means everyone's going to be alive, and then you can go to Fort Frolic, which is where we meet Sander Cohen.
Yes.
Who we talked about, and who would have been Johnny Depp, I believe, in the film version of this, if they were.
Oh, really?
I think apparently the film has not actually been properly cancelled yet, but
okay.
He was
Johnny Depp has been, so I don't think we'll see him.
Good point. Tenenbaum is Amber Heard.
I actually quite enjoyed this part of the game.
This is the best part.
Again, yeah, but also it's a bit of a shame because I think it's the most fluff the game has, like in terms of like telling us a story, like it does nothing to add to anything, and you could just pull it out wholesale, and I don't think it would affect the narrative in any way.
It's interesting because Sander Cohen makes the point that he has blocked the radio transmissions from Ryan and Atlas, which means, and he never says "would you kindly," so he obviously doesn't know who you are. Mm-hmm. He just calls you Little Moth all the time, and he tells you that he's testing you, isn't he? He says, "Oh, I've got tests for you." So, first of all, he unleashes a spider splicers on the ceiling to attack you. When you've killed enough of them, he says you've passed the test. He opens his area to Fort Frolic for you to go and meet him. It's a very cool area. It's got full of theatres and boutiques.
Yeah, it's really well done.
Really sort of vibrant colours everywhere. And he's got all these mannequins or plaster casts, whatever they are, but they basically are real. Because if you hit them, there's blood everywhere. They bleed if you hit the mannequin things. So the motive around all of this area is that you are killing these men that have betrayed Sander Cohen in some way, and taking the photos for him to put up in this masterpiece, as he calls it, which is on the stage in the main hall, the main atrium. And once you've taken all these photos, he's then going to cooperate with you. What have we got? So I found some place. There's some places of note. You've got Cohen's collection, which is like an art gallery, and that's the one with a table. It's got like a family scene set up of all these plaster casts sitting at a table. There is a strip club, and it seems to sound, now I don't know if you remember this, but you get a ghostly vision in this strip club that you go to, and it sounds as if Ryan kills this stripper because he impregnated her, but she sold the fetus to someone because she needed money. I missed that. So it sounds as if Ryan wanted to make a kid with this stripper or prostitute or whatever, and she sells the baby and he kills her for it because she's dead on the bed when you go in there or whatever. So that was a bit weird. You go into the theatre where you find the first guy, and he's playing the piano under duress from Sander Cohen, and then the guy gets upset at the end because he can't please Cohen enough, and then Cohen blows him up, and that's where you first start to get this mission to photograph people. What else have we got here? So basically, that's when you have to. Once you've done all of that, this is where you get the crossbow as well. He gives you the crossbow to kill people with as a prize for the first picture that you take. And after you've done all of that, this is when Cohen finally shows himself at the top of the stairs to the atrium, and he minces his way down there, and then gives you this plasmid from the case. So he says if you were his true protege, he'd have given you what's in the box next to him, and then he tells you quite menacingly to get out. So at this point, you've got the option of killing him or sparing him. He comes back later if you don't kill him, which is...
Oh, I didn't know I had an option. I think I just wasted him.
So yeah, you can get the key off him there for the box, but if you don't kill him, you can get into his apartment later on in...
right.
Where I can't remember where it is now, but he has a power to the people machine in there, which you need to get all of the gun upgrades. But so thoughts on Sander Cohen? He's
he's delightfully insane, and I think it fits well. Like that whole area was designed really well from like his personality type to the actual like layout and design of the area of the entertainment zone, so to speak. I just think it was a really nicely done area. I enjoyed the fights. They were very wave based, but that's what BioShock is.
And it was nice to have these guys kind of legging it from you, and that you're sort of chasing them down. And he's definitely the embodiment of what you'd expect someone who lived in that utopia to have been and turned into. This really grandiose, guy with this panache for using, flair in his voices and telling poems. And, even when he blocks the bath sphere off right at the beginning of his level, you've got this big bunny mask that comes out and all these mannequins that come floating down and all this stuff. Yeah, it's a very cool aside in the game, which, as you say, doesn't really serve the overall narrative that much.
No, I wonder if I'm trying to think if the designers just thought they would give you a break from the churning through monotony. No, it's not monotony. It wasn't monotonous. That's not the right word, but it's just like a palate cleanser, I think, for the next part of the game, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it's a shame because, like I say, it's my favourite part of the game, but I think it's also the most needless part.
Yeah.
If you were trimming fat, it would go.
It must be that they really believed in it.
Yeah.
They just really wanted this artist guy to be in here and look at all this fucked up imagery we can create, but we can't think of a reason to keep it involved with Atlas or whatever. So.
Yeah.
So after we've dealt with him, then we finally get on the way to Andrew Ryan's office. We begin our journey there, and we end up in, I think it's pronounced Hephaestus. Don't know how you say that.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's you walk out and you see it, and it stands oppressively above you. It's this big, massive sort of factory. It's got this like opulent red light that spews out from it and lights up all the hallway that leads to it. This is like a really big industrial area. And I think I remember them saying on the documentary or the commentary or whatever it is on the game that Ryan is such a big industrialist. He's a hard worker who's created this empire for himself, and he would want to be involved in this. He doesn't live in the big high-rise flats and penthouses. His office and his base of work is in this big factory where he feels most at home because that's where he got to where he is. We've had audio logs throughout the game for a while from this McDonough guy who felt like he was some sort of janitor or dog's body for Ryan. Right. And at this point is where he says that he's had enough. He's finally resigned. He can't take doing all this dirty work for Ryan, having to kill all these people, having to get all these little girls and set them up to be little sisters. He can't handle it anymore. So we later then hear of his desire that he wants to kill Ryan, but unfortunately we get that from an audio log off of a corpse that's hung up on the wall. So I assume that he failed in that mission.
Yeah, seems that way.
And this is where we have to overload Core 3 to get into Ryan's office. And the solution lies in the failed machinations of Supervisor Kibberts, who was building an EMP bomb, as you do, to overload the core. And then we do yet another fetch quest as we have to go grab parts to assemble this EMP bomb.
Yeah, I'm not into those, to be honest.
There's a lot of them in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, the area, I don't mind the area because it's totally different from everything else. It's no longer the user interface of Rapture, if you want to, it's behind the curtain now. We're into the main, meat and potatoes of how this place runs.
Yeah, that's true.
During all of this, you get loads of diatribe off of Ryan. He's always interrupting what you're doing, and at this point, he's now starting to reveal the plot to you piecemeal by saying he casts doubt on how you somehow miraculously managed to crash land in the middle of the ocean right next to a Rapture, and how's that happened, and why, do you not think that's a bit weird? And after you've constructed the bomb, you head down to the core, which, completely fries the core, unleashes, it raises the alarm. Ryan raises an alarm. Loads of splicers and sentry bots come at you. You've got to fight your way through all of those until you get to the circuit breaker gate to his office. You throw it open, and then here we go. You're on to Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
But before you get there, you're in Rapture Central Control now. Ryan sets off the self-destruct, so to bring down the whole city again, saying if Atlas can't take it from him because we're all gonna be dead. A little bit more foreshadowing where you get Sushong's diary that hints at your genetic similarities to Ryan, as only those with Ryan's genetic makeup can use the Vita chambers to come back to life again. So Ryan's office is sealed shut, so you have to find a crawl space, and you drop down into a room where it's got a massive wall that says the words "Would you kindly" on it. Looks like in blood, and it's got loads of pictures all connected with string, and that's where you start to learn, and you hear these audio logs. So where you get that audio log of Suchong, that really horrible one where he's been talking about creating babies, and then there's the next one where he's talking about he gets that boy to kill his puppy, break its neck. Remember that?
No.
So there's he's got an audio log of a kid that he's testing the mind control out on. So I think he uses "Would you kindly" as well, and he gets this little boy to break his own puppy's neck.
Oh my goodness.
Which I thought would have stayed with you because we both hate dog violence.
Yeah,
anything.
I've also just deleted that from my head.
Wise. And then this is finally where we get to see Ryan himself. So I'm going to play the little clip, and then we'll talk about that afterwards. Here's the clip.
In the end, what separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys. You think you have memories. A farm. A family. An airplane. A crash. And then this place. Was there really a family? Did that airplane crash? Or was it hijacked? Forced down. Forced down by something less than a man. Something bred to sleepwalk through life until they are activated by a simple phrase spoken by their kindly master. Was a man sent to kill, or a slave? A man chooses. A slave obeys.
So, this is it. Ryan tells you you've never had any family. You're a test tube baby. You're controlled by the phrase "Would you kindly," which then Ryan uses to force you to beat him to death with his own golf club. How do you feel about this? Does it still resonate with you? Was it still? I thought it was brilliantly acted. In fact, I don't think any of these actors in this game were like the typical ones we'd expect. They weren't famous actors. A lot of them were just the staff. But I think the overall voice acting in this game is amazing. Some of the voices are Ken Levine. I think he does the
really?
Circus of Values fucking annoying clown thing.
Oh, does he?
Which was in my head. I find myself going down making cups of tea like. But yeah, what's your thoughts on the Ryan twist moment?
Yeah, I think this is where this game really comes into its own. This is why people hold it up to be the classic masterpiece that it's seen as today. Mm-hmm. This is sort of the seminal moment where everything comes together, and it allows the game to sort of continue and build upon this unreliable narrator theme that it's done. So like it almost feels like the fake ending of the game, and then you get hit with the unreliable narrator stuff and the would you kindly stuff, and it just realizes that everything you've been doing up to this point has been shrouded in lies and secrecy. So it's like, because I think the first time through this game, if I remember back to that time, it does feel like this is sort of you're building up to the end.
Yeah.
And then you get that climax and realise that it's not the climax that you thought it was going to be, which then powers you on to sort of the back third of the game.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to play still after this.
There
in
is.
my head, I think in my head this was near the end of the game, but it's really, really not.
No, and in terms of areas, there aren't many, but they are long areas after this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's true. And yeah, I think this is where the game, I think it's part age and part design, but I remember this is where my enjoyment of the game started to wear after this, and sort of this part happened. Like I was still engaged in the story, but in terms of the gameplay, this is where it starts to feel a little bit long in the tooth post this section for my money. The actual section itself, though, I can't fault it. It's really great. It's really well, like you're saying, it's really well acted, and it was unlike most things we had seen in games up to that point. Yeah, and I think that shouldn't be overlooked, and I think that's important to place it in context.
And I think if you relate this to the ending of Infinite, where I feel that this is talking about an overall meta critique of game narratives and how you know your actions as a player of a game are scripted and forced upon you, whereas you compare that to the ending of Infinite, which got really wordy and overly kind of, there's always a lighthouse, there's always a man.
Yeah,
that this was done in a much better way. It's on a much more human level of you just sort of being forced to do this stuff for this person who is effectively your relative, because it's his DNA you were created from. Yeah. Albeit by Fontaine, who of course reveals himself at this point. But as you say, after this, it just sort of becomes a revenge mission. It's just, I'm going to go kill Fontaine now because he's a bellend and look what he's done.
Yeah. And Fontaine even becomes this like over the top villain, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got this evil laugh that he does when you've overridden the self-destruct. Although I suppose, while you were talking about this, thinking about it, I guess the next part of this game, which is where you get Fontaine then tries to kill you immediately. He sets all these, again, turrets and bots and splices after you. You follow a little sister who takes you into this little crawl space where you pass out, and you eventually end up in Tenenbaum's safe house.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder if you could maybe counteract our points earlier with the fact that Tenenbaum is there. She is I assume now, because even before we arrived, that Fontaine knew she had sort of reneged on her initial mantra and her real reason for being in Rapture to create these little sisters. She had these regrets. And of course, this point, we have to then try and get rid of the mind control that Fontaine says he has over you. Maybe he was aware that you could potentially seek her out, or she would seek you out to try and save you from this mind control, because there is an antidote for it. So that's what maybe needed the theatrics of, I'm Atlas, please help me kill Ryan. He gets you all the way up to where you've done the thing he wants you to do before he then reveals it. So maybe there was this point of, well, if he finds out that Tenenbaum can actually save him and I'm controlling him with would you kindly, I'm fucked. So I better keep this up to persuade him as well.
Hopefully.
And if not, that's how I'm going to see it from now on.
Yeah.
So we wake up in the the safe house. This is where Tenenbaum is through the window. She tells you were created by Suchong, used by Fontaine, and that he still has some control over your mind, and that we need to go to Suchong's apartment to get Fontaine's mind control out of us. So as you leave the hospital, Fontaine tries to make you go get stepped on by a big daddy by saying, "Would you kindly go get stepped on by a big daddy?" That doesn't work, and he gets really pissed off because you've obviously started to get rid of his mind control. And at this point is, as you said a minute ago, where he turns into this big bad, over the top villain, and he uses code yellow, which apparently makes your brain tell your heart to stop beating. And in game terms, this is what you randomly get your maximum health lowered there must be on a timer.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I mean, it really does try to make the end game quite difficult. You've got overpowered splicers, and you've got your own max health getting hammered. And this is all after the big reveal. So at this point, as you said, it's when it gets overly tough. It's overly long-winded. It's a little bit of a disappointment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I think this is just where the game just becomes overly long-winded and up its own ass in terms of it just extends things in a way that don't need to be extended, and it draws things out, and it starts relying on the fetch quests. Like there's the Big Daddy suit fetch quest that I guess we'll get to eventually,
which should be really fun. But on paper, I'm going to be a Big Daddy at the end of this game. Sounds really cool.
Yeah.
But it's just...
They make the journey to becoming that such a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
I mean, why couldn't you just... Oh, I guess they're sort of fused into their suits, aren't they? So you couldn't just take a whole suit off a body.
And I suppose you want to get out of the suit at some point, so maybe you have to do it your own manual way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the way to Suchong's apartment, we end up in Mercury Suites, which is this big, lavish complex. This is where you can go find Sander Cohen, provided you didn't kill him. The cool thing about
this is news. This is a complete revelation to me.
Yeah, so the cool thing about this is you go into his apartment. It's really ostentatious. So he's got these two Houdini splicers that are dancing together to some music, and they aren't hostile to you. So he says something about don't interrupt their dancing and leave them alone, or I'll fight you up, basically. But what you can do, which I did by accident, is underneath the record player that's playing the music they're dancing to is an electric buck. So I took the electric buck, and it makes the record player fall over, and the record skips, and both the splicers immediately just turn on you, and then he gets really annoyed.
Oh yeah, I did that too. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I forgot about that section.
Yeah, so after that, obviously Sander Cohen gets really annoyed, and that's what makes him come down from his apartment, and he busts out the door and he goes, "I'm Sander fucking Cohen!" And then once you've murdered him, you can then go in his apartment, and as I say, that is where you get the final power to the... Why has he got a power to the people machine in his apartment? I don't know. But maybe he just likes upgrading his guns in his bedroom. Again, it's still in America, technically. Suchong's not in his apartment. He's got an audio diary that reveals more about being enlisted to create you. And he then mentions that he's also created an antidote to the mind control, Lot 192. So you can find part of that in Fontaine's apartment, where you get your max health restored and no longer code yellow is affecting you. But at this point, you get a side effect of not being able to select which plasmid you want to use. And the game will randomly assign you a plasmid every 2
Oh, that's
or
right.
3
Yeah,
minutes.
it keeps changing. Yeah.
Weirdly, this gives you plasmids that you don't have as well.
Yeah, it just cycles them all, doesn't it?
Yeah. Because I kept getting enrage all the time, which I kept trying to throw at Big Daddies, and it said don't do that.
I just ended up just not using the plasmids, I think, unless I had to in that section, just because I never knew what I was going to get.
Yeah, there's a thing in the next section, which is Apollo Square, which is another apartment block, but it's a total shithole. It's all overrun, it's on fire, it's all dilapidated buildings in ruins and stuff. But you can finally get to Atlas's HQ, and in there's an armory. You can only get the stuff out of the armory with telekinesis. So I basically waited until it gave me telekinesis. Luckily, it was
just standing waiting.
It was only like a 1 or 2 cycles, and I spent most of my time trying to jump through the grate to get it anyway. But yeah, I luckily did get telekinesis on about the 3rd plasmid and managed to stick, because he's got everything in there. He's got all the weapons that you would want and all the ammo. You then finally get to Suchong's lab, which is in Apollo Square, and you can see, I assume, is him, the Doctor himself. Like, there's basically been drilled spine first into a table. And I think you get an audio log that you can hear him bitch slapping this little sister, and then the Big Daddy goes absolutely nuts at him for doing it. And I'm pretty sure that's why there's a Doctor in the middle of a table with a big drill through his back. Because pretty sure that's Suchong. And later on in the game as well, you get loads of audio logs that basically show how much of a shitheel coward this guy is. He is clearly very fearful, anxious, paranoid person who, every time something bad happens to somebody else, he always says things like, "Oh, good for Suchong, bad for this guy," or whatever. I do, however, feel that if you made a character like Suchong in a modern game today, you probably would get in trouble for his Chinese accent and his
probably
his English.
Pretty egregious, isn't it?
Yeah, bad for Ryan, good for Suchong. It's pretty bad. So in his lab is the second dose of Lot 192, because of course there couldn't be one, and we had to go find something else. So this is where Tenenbaum now says, right, now you're free of this. Time to go finish this. Kill Fontaine. Go to Point Prometheus. And we get to Point Prometheus, and Fontaine is at the entrance. He shows off all of his plasmid skills by like lifting stuff up, like lifting trains and chucking them around.
Yeah.
And then he legs it through to this door to the museum, seals it off, and this is where Tenenbaum says you're only going to get through this if you look, smell, and sound like a Big Daddy. So we get another fetch quest, this time with a cosplay element, which is this is what you were doing yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah, I somehow missed the boots, so I was walking around not doing anything. I think I need to be fair with the game. I think at this point, I was personally feeling that the game was just becoming a little bit long in the tooth, and I'd overstayed its welcome a little bit. So I was ready for it to be done.
Yeah. When
I actually think about it, the game, the area is okay.
I think this area is great.
Yeah, it's just, I wish there was a bit more direction. Like, it doesn't tell you a lot. It just sort of, it tells you to go and be a Big Daddy, and then like there's no, up to this point in the game, you can go to your objectives and see what you've got to do and knock it off. There isn't even a list of get boots, get gloves, get helmet, get suit, and like ticked off. So I didn't even know what I had until the game was just like, oh, by the way, you've got to go and get boots. And that was just like a little thing at the bottom. I
think that's got to be a limitation of the arrow, right? Because you only got one arrow, so I guess it can't point you to multiple things, so they just fucked it off and got rid of it.
Yeah. But I actually didn't mind this area. I thought it was quite good and quite fun.
I think, the fetch quest itself is a bit laborious, but the areas that you're in, because this is even more behind the curtain of Rapture now, because you've got the research centers, you've got the initiation of the Big Daddy areas where they've got all these suits hung up on the walls, monitoring machines, loads of terminals and stuff. You've got the Little Sisters, what's supposed to be, I assume, their nursery area, but you can see where they were all developed. So in terms of setting up how the depths of depravity that Rapture now is in was created, this area is really revealing in that sense. It's just a shame that it's filled with really tough enemies who are bullet sponges and a big fetch quest that kind of hampers your field of vision, because you've got to put a helmet on, and it then gives you this sort of weird blurry fisheye. And I had the Booze Hound perk as well, where you get more Adam from drinking instead of losing it. So I was constantly getting my character pissed as a fart, so he could then get. So I was drunk inside a bloody Big Daddy helmet.
That's nasty.
Yeah,
especially like because I was finding it. I was like, this is not fun to look at when you've got that helmet on and you walk underneath some water.
Yeah,
and it like drips all over your mask. That is not fun.
It's clever, but annoying.
Yeah.
Once you've got your suit, you grab a Little Sister from the vent by banging your wrench on it. She then crawls under the door and lets you into the museum, which, as an area visually, was a big disappointment, I thought. Other than the first room with the big dinosaur skeleton, I think the rest of it's pretty lame. It's just stuff it's just like fish and stuff on the walls and whatever. So now we've done our fetch quest to get the thing. We now do the only thing worse than a fetch quest, which is an escort mission.
Oh my god! Ending
the game with an escort mission. This is it just proves that it really was out of steam by this point. And after the Ryan thing, it's done. So
the two worst. Actually, it does two of my three most hated missions in video games. It does the fetch quest, the escort mission, and then one that it doesn't do, the follow mission.
Oh
You've got
God,
to
tailing
kill someone.
missions, yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake.
It doesn't quite hit the trifecta.
No, this is one of the worst things about this is how when you get the little sister to help you, for some reason, she still has to harvest corpses, even though you've saved her. So Tenenbaum says something like, Suchong's programming was so powerful that they still have to feel compelled to collect Adam, even though. So what was the point of saving him? And how do they become? Because at the end of it, apparently they go to school and shit. So how do these kids maintain normal lives after this? When even after we've saved them, we still have to protect them while they harvest Adam off of corpses and call us Mr. Bubbles. They don't sound saved at all to me.
No.
And let's not forget, saved little sisters still look fucking weird with their giant eyes and the really bad lipstick. They still don't look like normal little kids.
Yeah.
So yeah. After you've dealt with all these waves of enemies and a big daddy who breaks through the wall, it's finally time for a really shit boss fight. And for some reason, Fontaine has all these machines outside his own room that he didn't bother shutting down, that you're perfectly able to use to tool yourself right up for a fight. How did you feel about that fight? Now, when you were playing it, I obviously couldn't see it because thanks 2K for not letting anybody stream these games. So I heard you quietly deal with it and then just go, that was way easier than I remember it the first time.
Yeah.
So what's your feelings on this boss fight?
It was poor.
It
like
is.
they built this guy out to be such a beast, and he just was a little pussycat by the end of it. You could just ignore this. I'm assuming you're meant to find it hard because they start sending all these splicers at you, but you just ignore them. You carry on shooting Fontaine, and he goes down so easy.
Yeah.
Like, so quickly and so easy. You just got to stay out the way of the things he's throwing at you and just unload what you've got on him. And that was it.
And he has a big wind-up for those fireballs and things that he throws at you. It's really easy to sidestep it. I don't think he did me any real damage. It was mainly just the turrets and splicers and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit of a wet fart, to be honest.
It reminds me very much of the Joker fight at the end of Arkham Asylum. It's very similar. Mm-hmm. You've got a big hulking monster that's quite easy to get away from, but every now and then he has to recharge himself, and then he's just going to get a load of gank squads to come at you while he does it.
It's so video gamey, which is a bit of a shame, and it pulls it out. Like you were saying before, and we were giving it kudos for having the boss battles up to that point just being sort of regular guys.
Yeah. This
just sort of chucks all that out the window and goes for the most video gamey, big guy, strong guy boss that it could have done. I would have much preferred you actually get into that area was super hard, and then you get it and it's just this skinny little weed of a guy sitting behind a desk being abusive, and you can just go up and kill him. That would have been far more satisfying.
Like in Earthworm Jim, where you've got the boss is a goldfish and you just take him out of the bowl and throw him on the floor.
Yeah, that's a better one. The one in my head, I don't know if you ever played this game, but the one in my head is the end of Far Cry 4, where you get to the end boss and he's just having a meal at a big dining table, and you can either go up and sit and have a meal with him or shoot him and walk away. Yeah. That's it.
You can do that right near the beginning, can't you? You can just be his mate, and he's like, yeah, come on then, and he gets you in his helicopter. Yeah, another thing as well about this final boss that's really poor is the design. He just looks stupid. After all the incredible artwork they've got for Rapture itself, and then you've got the designs of the splicers, you've got the big daddies, and then at the end, a big blue man with muscles, and that's it.
Yeah. And he is, and like, I think in my memory, my BioShock 2 was that it sort of moved away from the sort of dark, gritty nature of the first game and just became a sort of comic book version of itself. Mm-hmm. And he is the epitome of that. It just feels so out of touch with the rest of the game.
It does. It really does.
It pulls you out of the experience quite abruptly.
Yeah, it does.
Which is a shame. It's a real shame.
And again, hindsight being what it is, Ken Levine has said, he hates the boss fight. He thinks it's stupid. He wishes it wasn't there. But obviously somebody signed off on a big blue man and a fight at the end. So maybe that was publisher pressure, or maybe it was just they got done by their own meta critique of, games always make you do stuff. Well, games always have boss fights at the end, so maybe they couldn't avoid it, and even they're part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So once you've finally drained him of his Adam, well, he goes into a machine to recharge it. You stick him with a syringe. Once you've done that 4 times, he initially sort of begins his final speech and smashes you away, but he gets interrupted by all these little sisters who jump on his back and stab him to death with their syringes. And then you get one of the 2 endings that we've kind of mentioned already. You either got one where you save all the little sisters, they get normal lives, they go to school, you die of old age with them all by your side, which, as we said, is very impressive considering you're a massive drug addict by this point. And have drank so much alcohol in my playthrough as well. Your liver must be absolutely fucking
pickled.
wrinkled. Yeah. Or you can have the one that we said where you harvest them and Tenenbaum just completely admonishes you for being such an evil bastard who creates nuclear war and unleashes all the splices. And
I wish there was somewhere
terrible.
in between. That just like such massive disparity between the two. Like you can either be a child killer or the savior of all children. Is too much.
Yeah. And that is the end of BioShock. And I guess we're approaching the end of the podcast, but some final thoughts on it. I still think the game is still pretty fun to play. It hasn't aged in terms of like walking around. It still feels like a modern game in that sense. As you said, you can see the tendrils of how it influenced a lot of games going forward. Yes, the audio logs are a bit sort of rote by this point, and they've been a bit done to death. They're kind of hard to get engaged with, but they are all really... They reveal the story in a cool way that's not overbearing. It's not full of cutscenes and stoppages. It's all really well acted. And I haven't gone back to it and thought this game isn't good anymore. I've maybe just thought that the parts of it that are bad are more magnified in 2021 than they were in 2007. But how do you feel?
I think for my money, it's a positive feeling for it. And I think if the question was like, is this game as good today as it was 10 years ago? I think the honest answer to that is no, it's not. But that's not to say it's not a bad game. And I think it's still a good game and it still has a lot to offer. There's a lot of enjoyment to be had from it. And I think if you're someone like us that has a big interest in video games and wants to sort of understand the history of the genre, the media and where it's come from, and this is one that if you did a video game history university degree, this would be part of the curriculum, because really there is a lot that this game has learned from, or the lot that the industry has learned from this game and continues to learn from. And like I said at the very beginning, sort of to close the loop nicely, that the tendrils can be seen. The audio logs were used, and it moved narrative on in a way that used to just be video, like especially first person games, but a lot of video games, it would be have some gameplay, have a cutscene, have some gameplay, have a cutscene, to the point that a lot of cutscenes, they felt they didn't feel interconnected with one another, and you could almost just watch the cutscenes in isolation and have the gameplay in isolation. They felt like two different products that they had tried to marry alongside each other and run in parallel. But as this actually brought the narrative into the game, and like you can talk about like things like your criticisms of it, i.e. like it's a bit odd to have your narrative play out in a way that you can get distracted from so easily, and also miss parts of the narrative by not picking up all the things. But again, bear in mind that the industry has come a long way in the last 10 years in terms of storytelling, and this is one of the important games for that. And I think for that reason, people that enjoy video games and have an interest in where they come from in the business, this is one of the games you need to have an understanding of.
Absolutely. I have nothing better to add than that. You've hit the nail on the head, and I've spoken so much of my notes of 3,500 words. I think I've got my voice
again, like peek between the curtain, Alex has put in an absolute butt ton of work on this podcast, putting together notes and research and stuff. So thanks, Alex. So thank you, Alex. The kudos actually has to go to him on this one, because he's put a lot of work into this episode, and it shows. So thanks for Alex. I really enjoyed that. That was fun, and cool, nice discussion about a cool game.
And I believe our next game we're going to play will be a brand new game when we play it, as it will be The Medium, which is the I don't know how you describe it really. I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. I just remember the trailer where you can kind of change the world, can't you? Into there's like two parallel worlds, and you switch between the two of them. So this will be our first Xbox Series X video.
Looking forward to it. Might as well have something to play on this machine other than Apex.
Yeah, this will be the first game purely built for this machine, I think, isn't it?
Oh, really?
To be released.
Brilliant. Oh well, should be fun.
Might get some ray tracing at least.
Use the power of the Xbox.
Exactly. So we'll have probably a lot more of a technological discussion going on for some parts of that. But that comes out on the 29th, I think it's next Friday or something. So so tune in after that, I guess a week or so after that, once we're done with it, and we'll have a new episode out.
The next game we discuss will be Medium, as Alex has said. But I think in between that, we're going to put out a best of a Winner Is You podcast, which takes, if I remember right, it's basically, is it a whole year or is it an entire body of work? It's like old podcasts we used to do sitting on Alex's spare room floor when we're at university.
Yeah.
You'll hear the fan whizzing away in the background, but it's actually quite a fun listen about where we started our life. We would have been in our early 20s.
Yeah, it would have been between 2009 and when I left uni, so 2012. So in that period,
we might even get some BioShock in there if we're lucky.
Maybe, yeah. I think
it would have been that period we were discussing it.
We definitely had we did lists, didn't we? We started doing lists of the best games of all those years, so we would have definitely talked about it then. I am quite tempted to do another best of for all the Gamatron shows because
that would be fun. Yeah,
because that would have been us at a slightly more,
hopefully better,
similar level to what we are now. Whereas back in the old Winner Is You days, we did a lot of fan fiction readings. We were asking each other like weird questions every week, which were really fun. I
enjoyed the weird questions in the fan fiction; they were great.
I reckon that's what got us the old award nomination back in the day.
Oh yeah,
we were doing shit no one else was doing, and now we're just copying everybody else. We're just old, cynical bastards just doing a normal show.
Although, funnily enough, though, this idea is about a 6-year-old idea we had for our podcast. It's just taken us this long to actually put it into play. So again, we're ahead of the game. We're just slow to manifest.
Yeah, we're just refining it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, did you look it up?
At a Winner Is You pod.
Yeah, so if you want to check out, make sure to keep up to date with when our stuff is going out, then that's the place to do it. And in the meantime, you can head over to goombastomp.com where our podcast is being posted.
Yes, that will have all the links. So we're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and David has also been doing YouTube videos. So when this one is out, you will be able to watch BioShock. I think after this one we're going to start recording ourselves, so we'll once we've got ourselves set up a little bit better in our podcasting rooms, we'll have video footage of us recording the show. But
that'll be good.
But the YouTube ones are worth watching if you want to see some gameplay footage while you're listening to this shit.
But let us know what you think of the podcast and share your thoughts with us on BioShock on Twitter by sending us some messages to interact with you guys. And I guess that takes us to the end of episode 3 of the Game Club BioShock podcast. As ever, I've been David, he has been Alex, we have been A Winner Is You, and I'm out.
Would you kindly keep gaming?
Juices! Oh,